Dragon Spells by Melinda Kucsera. A Cursebreaker companion novel. What's in a name? Many things. Since names are protected by privacy laws, we chose to change the names of all non-fictional people mentioned in this tale except our scribe because her name is her brand. So we can use her name as often as we like. Since the original version of this story included names and quotes from emails sent by our subscribers, we've abbreviated their names to their first initial to protect their identity. We take their privacy very seriously. All responses were paraphrased and in some cases wholly rewritten to fit the expanded story, but each one preserves the essence of the original response because our subscribers are awesome and they sent in some great ideas for how to separate a certain dragon from her latest fixation. The trouble with dragons. Hi readers. This is Ran, and you're probably wondering why I'm running. Well, that's because a dragon's chasing me. Before I get into why, I want to take a moment to remember all those who have given their lives for their country, and to thank those who are on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today we remember them, but we should thank them every day, not just today. So from all of us, thank you. And now back to me, Ran, Sarn's beloved son and sidekick, running for his life down a shadowy tunnel for your amusement. Why is a dragon chasing me? Well, you'll have to read on to find out. This is a spoiler-free introduction. Before you turn the page to see how this all turns out for your hero, me, I wanted to tell you Dragon Spells is based upon a series of stories called Dragon Troubles. Episodes of it published in our weekly newsletter in 2019, but it's been rewritten and a lot of new scenes have been added because who doesn't love more page time with yours truly? I must get extra scenes any way I can. The book you're about to read is more than 4 times the original word count. So, there's plenty of new material for those who followed the original story as it happened in 2019. If you're not currently a subscriber, now's an awesome time to sign up at https://mkucsera.com/welcome-my-characters so you don't miss a moment of our magical mayhem. If you hadn't guessed, this story's from my perspective with occasional forays into other people's minds, but those forays are for you. I don't know anything about them in the story. Who am I? I'm Ran, the son and sidekick of Sarn, the Cursebreaker from the Cursebreaker books by Melinda Kucsera. If you like this story, we recommend you check those out. We've got 9 books besides this one and 1 box set plus more on the way. No prior knowledge is necessary to read this story. We tried to tell this tale so anyone can enjoy it regardless of whether they have read any of our other books or earlier newsletter adventures. Hopefully, we achieved that. Those earlier adventures are coming to ebook too. They're taking longer to get there because the newsletter dragon hid some of the episodes and rearranged others. We're still tracking them down and piecing them together and of course demanding more scenes, more drama, more action, and more adventure because we can. You deserve more mayhem for your moolah. And now I present to you Dragon Spells. If you enjoy it, please leave us a review. Reviews are like report cards. They let us, characters, know how we did and how many plot holes we snuck past our scribe. It's sort of a game for us. But don't tell her. Love and hugs, Ran, your host and hero for this adventure. What a strange light. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. As I snuck down the shadowy tunnel, I listened for any signs my absence had been noticed. So far so good. The door to the Foundling's cave stayed closed, but a click disturbed the quiet and I turned. Where had that noise come from? Was there trouble afoot or worse on my trail? Nothing moved in the shadows, but I'd forgotten to take a Lumir crystal with me. Darn. I'd have to risk sneaking home to grab one. Papa always kept spares lying around because he liked light, and right now I could use some illumination. But that was the first place anyone would look for me, so I couldn't go there. But I needed light. My eyes didn't glow like Papa's did. Neither did my hands. Where else could I get something to light my way? This tunnel only sported a few of the glowing crystals called Lumir, but they were few and far between and left large areas in shadow like the one I stood in. This was a big problem. If I couldn't see where I put my feet, how could I find the right staircase? Only one had a secret door to the outside where Papa might be at this hour. Well, I wouldn't find it by standing around dithering where my babysitters could find me, so I crept over to the intersection of 2 tunnels. Which way led eventually to Papa? One tunnel was shadowed and the other was lit by a distant blue glow. I headed toward that light but stopped when the light came toward me. It was probably just a person holding a Lumiere crystal, but why a blue one? They were the only crystals that cooled the air around them. Papa never let me touch the blue ones for that reason. He didn't want those cold crystals to freeze my little fingers. So why was someone using a blue Lumiere crystal to light their way when there were plenty of other crystals that would just glow prettily without sucking the heat out of anything they touched? Something wasn't right here. That blue glow kept growing, but I couldn't see who was holding it. Someone had to be, because crystals didn't walk around on their own, not unless Papa's magic moved them. But I'd know if Papa was near. I'd feel all warm and safe, and I didn't, not one bit. I fell back a step as that light doubled and tripled in size. It was 3 times larger than me and coming this way much faster than a person who wasn't magically enhanced could move. Maybe I should run too. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel, but they were much louder than they should be. What on earth was going on here? The urge to run warred with the need to know until my natural curiosity won out. But I had second thoughts when the light doubled again. How big was this thing? Certainly taller than Papa, and he was the tallest person I knew. Maybe I should hide. I glanced around for somewhere to do that, but this tunnel didn't have any stalagmites cluttering it up. I shielded my eyes from that blue glow and backed into an intersection. What was making that light? I squinted at it and just made out a creature that wasn't human. For one thing, its head was disproportionately larger than a human head should be, which meant it was a monster coming to eat me. I spun on my heel and made like my nickname. I ran. "You can't escape me that easily," the creature said. Her growly voice was familiar, but it couldn't be who I thought it was. There was no internet here. How the heck did she even find me? I lived in a fantasy world, and she belonged in something called cyberspace, which was only accessible through the computer in my scribe's apartment. But Melinda lived in some place called the real world, a place I wasn't supposed to know existed. But I did know, and I'd visited it many times. That still didn't explain how that dragon had gotten here. This was all very confusing. "You can't be here. This is my world. You don't belong here," I said over my shoulder. I wished I had a weapon, but Uncle Murrin had made me leave my slingshot and metal balls at home, the big meanie. But here I am. The newsletter dragon stomped after me. How could she do that? How did you get here? That part didn't make any sense at all. She was made of code, not muscle and bone like I was. Nor was I curious enough to stop and find out what she'd done to protect herself, because tech and magic didn't mix at all. The one tended to short-circuit the other, and my subterranean world was saturated with magic. The original builders of this place had bespelled every surface down here, for reasons only they knew. But they were long dead, so I couldn't ask them what was up with that. The dragon exhaled and a fireball struck the rock next to me. I shut my mouth on the questions bubbling up inside me and ran as far and fast as my little legs could carry me through the dank tunnels under the mountain. There'd be time to ask questions later when I wasn't running for my life with no safety in sight, just a lot of dark shadows. But I didn't do quiet well, so my silence only lasted until I rushed around a bend into another intersection. "Papa! Where are you?" I tripped and landed on my knees, but my rugged pants protected me as I popped up and took off again. I should have grabbed a Lumiere crystal before I'd snuck out of the foundlings' cave. Why weren't they searching for me? One of the foundlings should have noticed I was gone by now. I'm small, but not small enough that they could overlook my absence for long. "I'm going to enjoy barbecuing you," the dragon bellowed as she thundered down the right-hand tunnel behind me. Eek! She was gaining on me. I pumped my arms and tried to eke out a little more speed from my tiring legs. "Papa!" He always knew where I was. I hoped that knowledge extended to my current circumstances, and that knowledge sent him running to help me. I could use his magic right now or some of my own, but that little flame inside me didn't react when I reached for it. I had magical potential. It just wasn't active or useful yet. I charged around another bend, searching for hidey holes. There had to be at least one around here, but none met my frantically scanning eyes as something caught the back of my tunic. That damn dragon effortlessly lifted me kicking and screaming into the air. How was she solid enough to pick me up? She was supposed to be made of code chunks, but I couldn't see any of the ones and zeros that usually comprised her. They were hidden under a layer of dark scales. She almost looked like a real dragon except for her creepy eyes. Rings of flickering blue ones and zeros revolved around those dark spheres, and they glared at me. But her eyes weren't the only part of her that glowed. A weird blue light shone from the horn in the center of her forehead. "Hey, put me down." I swung my little fists at her, but my arms were too short to land any real blows. Footsteps heartened me. Papa must be coming, but he'd better hurry up. "Papa? How about a magical shield for your only son? Or a rescue? A rescue would be awesome right now." I kicked at the dragon, but my feet didn't connect because my legs were too short. "Papa, where are you?" The things kids do. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. Sarn took the 200-plus dark twisting steps 3 at a time thanks to his magic. Green light shined out of his eyes and provided all the light he needed to see the steps winding around the pillar in the center of the spiral staircase. In the back of his mind, his map kept track of his location, and numbers appeared at the bottom left corner of his peripheral vision. They counted down the steps to the subterranean lower quarters, the only place indentured men like him were allowed to live. It was no place to raise a child, but it was his only option, so Sarn made the best of it. No doubt the bag of food thumping against his back would help make his cave a little homier. At least he hoped so. Ran had never complained, but his son had never lived anywhere other than in a damp cave under a mountain. And that's my fault. Sarn adjusted the sack weighing him down. Inside, various items clinked, crinkled, and probably squished. Just let them still be edible. Sarn was too tired to run back for more, and he was late too. His brother had already headed off to school. But he'd caught Murren in between classes long enough to hand his younger brother an egg sandwich and some fruit. Now Sarn just needed to feed his son, then maybe he could get some sleep. Ran wouldn't be happy about that, but neither did the boy have a choice. "I have to work nights." Which meant he had to sleep during the day when his son wanted to go out and play. Sarn slammed his fist into the wall enclosing the spiral staircase in frustration, and magic sheathed his fist in green energy, protecting it. "I have a debt to pay." That debt allowed his younger brother to attend school and hopefully escape the cycle of poverty before it claimed his life too. The counter ran down to 0, and Sarn exited the stairwell through a rough hole to a tunnel that dog-legged into the lower quarters. Before turning into it, he pulled his head map into view and searched it for anyone on an intercept course. People's symbols occupied the nearby tunnels, but no one appeared to be on a parallel path. Ditto for perpendicular tunnels, but that situation would change. Down here dwelt an awful lot of people. Thoughts of this place's population switched on the part of his magic obsessed with numbers, and an ache blossomed behind his left eye as a new counter appeared in the bottom right corner of his head map. Its tally jumped to 1,000 and kept rising. Before his magic could reach out and count every person who lived under the mountain, Sarn gave it a new directive. "Find my son." A white star immediately appeared in place of the counter, but there was something not quite right about it. Why was his son running around down here on his own? One of the foundlings was supposed to be watching him. Another marker appeared on his map, but he didn't recognize it. What the hell was going on? It was time he found out. As the unknown symbol gained on his fleeing son, Sarn dropped the sack of food. He could return for it later after he ran out of whatever trouble the boy was in now. Sarn broke into a run, and his magic pushed him to hurry up and save his son. The tunnels blurred as he ran like his son's life depended on it because it just might. His map didn't have enough details to tell for certain. Sarn shot around a bend. Ahead, a gauntlet of broken stones waited. His cave lay at the other end of that obstacle course, but he navigated the collapsed columns and piles of debris with ease, thanks to his magic. It nudged his feet, keeping them on firm footing. No matter how broken up the ground became, his magic rushed in and stabilized it before any loose stones could trip him up. Relief energized Sarn as he cleared the last obstacle between him and his son. "Papa!" Ran shouted from around the corner. Sarn skidded to a stop just a few feet away from a scene ripped from his worst nightmare. His adorable little boy hung from a large sharp claw and swung his little fists ineffectually at an honest-to-God dragon, complete with wings and a spiky tail coiled snake-like on the floor behind it. Ran didn't hit the dragon, but not for lack of trying. The boy must have sensed he was near because Ran called out to him. "Papa? How about a magical shield for your only son? Or a rescue? A rescue would be awesome right now. Papa!" Right, he should stop gawking and save his son. Sarn sent a burst of magic to collect the boy, and his magic wrapped around his son, cocooning him in an impenetrable shield. Rand floated on a cloud of green energy safely into his arms, and he hugged that boy tightly. "Thank you, Papa." Rand hugged him hard. The talkative tyke seemed none the worse for wear, thank fate. That was a small miracle, judging by the anger flashing in the dragon's peculiar eyes. In fact, the dragon was a lot smaller than Sarn had thought one would be in the flesh. She was maybe twice his 6.5 feet in height. Shouldn't she be a lot larger? Her horned head didn't even touch the ceiling. Granted, the stalactite-covered ceiling was about 40 feet high. Weren't dragons supposed to be massive? Well, this one wasn't. The dragon approached, but she wasn't heavy enough to shake the floor, not with the protective spells in the stonework redirecting her weight. Sarn backed away from her and the blue light shining out of her eyes and horn. "What's going on here?" Sarn relaxed his tight embrace so he could look his son in the eyes. Rand was a small, bubbly copy of him, but thankfully, the tyke didn't have any magic yet. "You should run now," Rand said into his shoulder. "Why?" Sarn looked from the dragon exhaling smoke rings to his son. What was all that smoke for? "Because the dragon might still be mad at me." Rand ducked his head to hide his guilty little face. "Why is the dragon mad at you?" Sarn regarded his son in perplexity. What could such a sweet child possibly have done to upset a dragon? "I might have said a few things, but they were all true." Rand started to cross his heart, but Sarn stopped him. "Don't swear. Promises are binding. You have to be careful what you say to people, especially to me." Sarn squeezed his son's hand and let go. A string of well-intentioned promises had bound him body and soul to more masters than he wanted to think about, and Sarn had no way out of that. Nor did he want that kind of life for the boy he held close to his heart. His son should be free to pursue whatever he wanted, not tied to a bunch of promises made in ignorance. Sarn knew he should cut himself some slack. He'd been a stupid teenager at the time he'd made those promises. Unfortunately, that didn't make them any less binding. A fireball struck the shield around them, cutting off the recriminations looping through his mind, and it exploded in a shower of sparks. Of course, Rand reached for them. "Ooh, pretty." No, they weren't, so Sarn kept a firm hold on his son. "Face me," the enraged dragon beat her fisted claws against her chest, and that sounded like a fine idea. Sarn had some frustration to work off, and a dragon was the perfect opponent. But first he had a son to put somewhere safe. Preferably somewhere the boy couldn't interfere, like their cave. It was even more fortified than this tunnel. Rand would be safe in there, and it wasn't far away. In fact, his cave was in the next tunnel. Sarn backed into a wall, and his magic seeped into it. "Let me pass." The stones behind him liquefied and flowed away on either side of him, forming a temporary doorway he slipped through before it closed, revealing a solid wall again. "Thank you." Sarn rested a hand against the wall, then turned away. "Did we just walk through a stone wall?" Rand stared at him in awe. "Yeah, it was in the way." Sarn didn't see what was so special about that. "My magic likes rocks. I just let it rearrange them." Sarn shrugged. "That was so cool. Can we do that again?" His son's eagerness took Sarn by surprise. "I guess we could." What he'd done wasn't hard. Sarn just hadn't thought of it before. The wall shook as the dragon rammed it, and cracks appeared in the stonework. This section wasn't reinforced by ancient spells, and that was the only reason Sarn had even considered going through it. But it wouldn't stand up to a concentrated attack for long. Sarn sprinted to his cave and flung the door open. "Stay here. I'll handle this." Before Rand could protest, and his son had been about to, judging by the stubborn set to his jaw, Sarn set the boy down inside their cave and shut the door. A loud bang echoed through the tunnel, followed by loud footsteps. Sarn sent some of his magic into the stone lintel, and it hugged the door. "Keep the door closed. Protect my son." There, that should do it. Rand would be safe now, but he wasn't. Sarn turned to face the dragon running toward him. Cryptic Bears. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. Papa had done his worried parent thing again and put a solid door between us. It was just him and the dragon now, and I didn't even have a keyhole to peer through. So not fair. What if something bad happened to Papa? How would I know? I pounded on the door as hard as I could with my little fists. "Let me out." The door to our cave was usually secured by a metal bolt, but I threw it back, and the door still wouldn't open. I kicked it for good measure. Green light seeped between the door and jamb, ensuring it stayed firmly closed. Even Papa's magic was in on the stop-ran-from-participating game. That was even more unfair because there was no arguing with Papa's magic when it got all protective like this. Hang it up, kid. He won't let you out until it's safe, and that might take a while, Bear said. But I pointed futilely at the door that refused to budge. Bear shook his head and turned the page. My stuffed friend appeared to be reading. But Bear didn't have eyes. He had 2 buttons that shined when his spirit was in residence, as it was now. What are you reading? It looked like a book, but some books had stories in them, and some didn't. I didn't want to assume this was the storybook kind. I crossed to the mattress where he sat to get a better look at it. Some legal stuff. Bear didn't even look up from the book. Whatever for? I glanced at them, but the pages were covered in tiny words. There wasn't a single picture among them. I gave the book a moue of distaste. No reason, just curiosity. Bear shrugged. You're curious about what? I fingered the crocheted throw at the end of the ratty mattress. It was new to this cave, and I wondered if it had come from Melinda's apartment. Sometimes we borrowed things from her. How damages will get repaired. With a dragon around, things will break. I'm curious about who pays to fix them. Bear gave me an unreadable look. I just shrugged. That sounds like a good puzzle for Papa. He likes solving mysteries, and I like helping him. Do you think he's okay out there? The door still glowed faintly green and probably wouldn't open if I tried the handle again. I folded my arms over my chest while I waited for a response, but Bear just turned the page. Was he ignoring me? A loud bang startled me, and the door rattled and shook. When it stilled, the cave was silent again until Bear turned another page. Is Papa okay out there? He's all alone with an angry dragon. And I couldn't hear anything anymore because our cave had thick walls. That was also Papa's doing. He had an affinity for rocks, and so did his magic. He can shield. The dragon can't, Bear said finally as he continued to read. He wasn't concerned at all, but worry had twisted my little tummy into knots. Bear rolled his button eyes. What? Oh, don't look at me like that. He'll be fine, and all that shielding is good practice. Your father needs a teacher. True, but I should be with him. We always adventure together. I willed the door to open and for Papa to walk in whole and undamaged. In case you haven't noticed, we're not on an adventure at the moment. Bear frowned at what he was reading and flipped several pages before reading some more. But we could go on an adventure at any moment. I bounced on the balls of my feet. Excitement filled up all the worried places inside me, leaving no room for anything else. I loved adventures, even the dangerous kind. Maybe. One never knows when an adventure will knock on your door. Bear furrowed his furry brow as he riffled through the book, searching for something. Or where that adventure will take you. I reached for the door handle. Maybe this time it would open. It didn't. Drat. It's a mystery, my young friend, but so are many things. Bear winked a button eye at me and turned another page. This time a sword poked out of the blocks of words. Bear shoved it back in with a swipe of his well-padded and quite furry paw. I eyed the book curiously. I liked stories with swords in them. Papa didn't have a sword, but he wanted one. Some dumb law said indentured servants like Papa couldn't bear arms, and that included swords. There was another law that outlawed the use of magic. Papa broke that law just by existing, so he had to be extra careful whenever he left our cave. If anyone ever saw his glowing eyes, he could be in big trouble. Why were all the cool things against the law? A red light shined out of the book. Bear gave me another impenetrable look and pushed the light back in between the pages. But I was onto him. He was trying to distract me, and it was working. The questions were bubbling up inside me again. I needed answers. What are you really reading? I pointed to the book. When another sword thrust out of it, I retracted my hand and backed away as that wickedly sharp blade swept toward me. Where did that come from? Nowhere important. Bear clucked his tongue as he batted the sword away, and it melted back into the book. But he was enjoying this. The more I squirmed, the more he fought the grin his lips had been stitched into. What the heck was he reading? I bit my lip to keep from asking again, but the question was on the tip of my tongue. burning a hole in me the longer it went unanswered. Bear knew it too. His button eyes shone with mirth as he turned another page and winked at me. What do you think I'm reading? Tete-a-tete with the dragon. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. Why were you chasing my son? Sarn glared at the dragon. Magic filled his cupped hands warm and emerald bright, ready to be cast. But down here there were so many spells worked into the walls, ceiling and floor. Sarn had to be careful not to hit or disrupt any. Otherwise, he could cause a cave-in. Never again. One cave-in was enough. It had been years ago, but the nightmares still plagued him. All thoughts of them vanished as the dragon charged. Sarn threw up his hands to block her, and magic shot from them into a green half-dome. The dragon crashed into that shield, driving Sarn backward until he struck the door. Blue glowing ones and zeros fountained off the dragon as she pushed against his shield, intent on crushing it. Her scaly hide disintegrated where it touched his magic, exposing the luminous lines of code that had spawned her. But what the hell was she doing here? Sarn hadn't recognized the so-called newsletter dragon at first, but he was used to seeing her as a two-dimensional rendering of code on a screen, not a scale and bone dragon. The more she slammed into his magic, the more her physical body devolved back to the bits and bytes that usually comprised her. She seemed to be unraveling, layer by layer, but there wasn't any blood underneath those leathery scales. How did you get here? Sarn shoved the dragon with a burst of magic. Magic disrupted tech, but what effect did tech have on magic? Wouldn't you like to know? The dragon grinned, then exhaled another fireball larger than the first. It washed over his shield, eating away at it. Some of the fire got through and singed his green uniform. Damn it. It was expensive to replace. Sarn fed more magic into his disintegrating shield and scanned the wall behind the dragon. It wasn't load-bearing. Good. Sarn pulled on it with his magic and rocks pummeled the dragon's back, and that cut off her fire. She growled and bared her teeth. Smoke curled out of her mouth, but no more fire shot out. Is that all you've got? Because it'll take more than a few stones to stop me. No, that wasn't anywhere near all he had, but Sarn had to tread carefully, because there was a mountain on top of them and 10,000 souls lived inside it. How could he defeat a dragon? What would his heroes do? Sarn searched his memory for an answer. One of the guardians of old must have faced down a dragon in centuries past. Shiari had been a wilder place then. What would they do in this situation? Sarn didn't know, but he needed a plan fast or to stall until he came up with one. Stalling looked like his only option. Damn. Why are you after my son? He's just a little kid. There's nothing he could have done to incite such anger. That's for me to know and you to wonder. The dragon lunged for him, but Sarn dodged and the dragon crashed into a wall. It didn't even flinch though, because the protective spells in it evenly distributed the force of her impact, so no one section took the brunt of it. This isn't about some comments he made. So what's it really about? Sarn grabbed the fallen rocks with his magic and slammed them into her back, but they broke upon the spikes along her spine. Maybe he has something I want. The dragon snapped a kick at Sarn, but she hit his shield instead, and he collapsed its outer edge and wrapped it around her foot. She spun, using her tail to balance, and kicked out with her other foot, but Sarn repeated the trick and captured that foot too. The dragon landed on her side, teeth bared in a snarl as he punched out with his shield and sent her sliding down the tunnel. She dug her claws into the stones and stopped herself halfway down the tunnel, buying him a moment to regroup. Sarn staggered as exhaustion mauled him, and the world threatened to gray out for a moment. He shook his head and his vision cleared in time to see the dragon charging not at him but at the door, her mouth wreathed in flames. Oh no, you don't. You're not getting past me. Sarn stepped in front of it, and the dragon crashed into his shield, driving him backward with the force of the collision. The door behind Sarn swung inward, and he skidded across the floor, shoving the dirty laundry out of the way. His sixth sense screamed at him to protect his son as the dragon sucked in another breath to fuel another fireball. Secretive bears in their books. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. If I knew what you were reading, I wouldn't have to ask. I flopped onto the mattress beside my stuffed friend and his ghostly inhabitant. It didn't pancake under me, because I only weighed a fraction of what Papa did. I didn't care if this put me in sword range. I needed to see those pages and the words written on them. I couldn't read, but I could memorize the shapes of the letters and draw them later for my uncle who could read. Bear turned the page to a blank one. No fair. If you're good, maybe I'll read you some of it. Bear adjusted his hold on the book as the door flew open. Papa slid backward across the uneven stone floor of our cave on a thin layer of magic. Green lightning raced over his boots, stopping him well short of the wall. Papa! I sat up and crashed into a sparkly wall of magic, pressing me into the mattress. Darn it. Papa was doing his protective thing again. Let me up. I can help. I shoved at the magic holding me down until a fireball struck it. Maybe Papa was onto something with this whole shielding thing. I'm fine. Stay where you are. Papa waved at me. His green eyes blazed with magic and his hands were all lit up too. Indeed, he looked okay. His green tunic and trousers were a little singed in places, and his equally green cloak was mending a tear in itself. A half-dome of green energy stood between Papa and the angry dragon pushing on it. He fell back a step as the shield collapsed inward, hugging him more tightly. The dragon raised her horned head for another go at him, but her gaze caught on the fiery purple hoop floating nearby. Uh-oh. I'd paid so much attention to the dragon and bear, I hadn't noticed the portal had appeared in the back corner of our cave. So that's where you've been hiding it. The dragon sidestepped Papa and his shield and dove through the portal. We have to stop her. I pushed against the magic that was still holding me down. Let me up, Papa. A loud crash drowned out whatever Papa had been about to say as the portal started shaking. Why's it doing that? It's never done that before. I stared in fascination at the dancing portal. That purple glowing hoop functioned as a magical doorway to our scribe Melinda Kucsera's apartment. Through its quaking aperture, a slice of her living room went in and out of focus. I just hoped the computer I used to send Melinda's newsletter each week was okay. The dragon who'd just left had tried to take it over on more than one occasion. I had to get to that computer and stop her. Papa's magic released me as he passed the mattress, and I grabbed a handful of his pant leg to stop him from doing that protective parent thing and declaring that I had to stay here, or some other nonsense. Because that wasn't happening, and he should know that by now. I'm coming with you. Of course you are. Papa bent and set me on my feet. Where you go, I go, I reminded him, just in case he was having second thoughts about that, and right now we needed to go through that portal. We couldn't allow anything dangerous near our scribe, and that included angry dragons. Are you coming, Bear? I glanced at my stuffed friend. Bear turned another page. Not right now. You run along without me. Are you sure about that? Because the book he was skimming didn't look like it was all that unput-downable. No more swords had appeared, and its pages didn't glow anymore. The book looked ordinary in his paws now. In answer to my question, Bear nodded his bulbous head. His stitched lips didn't so much as twitch when he spoke, but I heard his words loudly and clearly, and so did Papa. I'll be along later. Give the dragon my regards. Okay. It was weird that Bear wanted to stay here, but he'd been disappearing from our adventures quite often lately. He must be up to something. I'd have to figure out what after we dealt with the dragon. She was dangerous. Bear was just cryptic. When my brother returns from school, tell him where we went. Papa pointed to the portal, then had to shield his eyes when its glow intensified, turning it white-hot for a moment before it faded back to its usual purple. Will do. You have my word on that. Bear waved without looking up from the page he was reading. Ow! I rubbed my smarting eyes. Papa had blocked some of the light with his body because he was more than twice my height, but that light had been way too bright. Something must have gone very wrong on the other side of that portal. I rushed toward it before Papa could stop me. Dragon interrupted. Somewhere in between worlds. Things hadn't worked out like the so-called newsletter dragon had thought they would. When she dived into that portal, she'd forgotten one important fact: it was magical and she wasn't. The nice three-dimensional body she'd just been piloting disintegrated, leaving just the idea of her behind, and she was pissed at that because her plan hinged on having a physical body that could manipulate certain objects. Oh well, there was nothing she could do about that setback until she exited the portal, but transiting it was taking a lot longer than it should have. Was it stuck or something? Had it lost its fix on the real world where her cyber kingdom dwelled? The newsletter dragon would have clicked her claws together to break up the monotony of all that purple light surrounding her, but her damned claws weren't corporeal at the moment. They were dark spaces inside a latticework of blue glowing ones and zeros. Why wasn't she moving? She should be. Otherwise, she'd never reach the end of this bridge between worlds. The newsletter dragon unfurled her wings, but they were like her claws. Lines of blue glowing code sketched graceful arcs behind her, like luminous ASCII art. Since they had no substance, flapping them did no good. Damn it. Well, that left only one option: walking. If she was reduced to locomotion again, she'd do it with style. The newsletter dragon pushed to a stand on her hind legs and put some swagger into her stride. A series of slow claps stopped her in her tracks. Who dared to mock her? Better yet, who had followed her into this magical tunnel? If it was that infernal little boy, she'd do what? Snarl at him. Because that was all she could do without a proper body that had some heft to it. But when she turned to look back the way she'd come, there was no one there. That was odd. Where had that clapping come from? It looks like you could use some help, a man said. But he wasn't behind her. When she faced forward again, he wasn't in front of her either. Where was that guy? Where are you? The newsletter dragon put her long neck to good use and scanned both ends of the tunnel. Portals didn't talk, so it wasn't talking to her. What a preposterous thought. Portals weren't sentient. She was losing her mind in here. Tech and magic didn't mix, and neither did ideas. I'm stuck between worlds, much like yourself, but we can help each other. A faint shadow moved against the light behind and to her left. It was man-shaped. How? The newsletter dragon approached the shadow. It was barely there, but other than her and the purple glowing walls of this portal, there was nothing else there. So as improbable as it seemed, that shadow had to be her mysterious interlocutor. Who are you? Come, sinner, to your dark father fly. Let us whisper lies that fortify. The smudge marring a section of the luminous wall darkened until it had the crisp outline of a guy in flowing robes. That sounds like a line from one of my scribe's books. Are you one of her villains? The newsletter dragon folded her forelimbs over her chest. Maybe I am. Does it matter? His shadow grew until it dwarfed her. The newsletter dragon supposed it didn't, since Melinda wouldn't like what she had in mind. But did she want to team up with a true villain? As the only digital character in the cast and a dragon to boot, the newsletter dragon had always been a gray character who helped or hindered depending on which provided the most entertainment value at the time. If she accepted this shadow man's help, he'd want help in return. After all, that was quid pro quo. Come, sinner, your time is nigh. The shadow man extended his hand to her. She already owed one entity a favor. Earlier in cyberspace. The newsletter dragon curled up and admired her hoard, a pile of sparkling email addresses. Each one represented a person she could contact or not. If anyone like that annoying child Rand wanted to talk to them, he had to go through her. After all, it was her list. But you want more than this, don't you? A woman asked, and she sounded disturbingly like the scribe who'd invented the newsletter dragon because she couldn't manage her email list. Who said that? The dragon scanned her digital environment. She'd rendered it out of quality three-dimensional models because every dragon needed an extensive cave system with piles of gold, jewels, and cool-looking weaponry. What self-respecting dragon wouldn't have at least a few laser guns, plasma rifles, and a sophisticated monitoring system? She was digital and thus not limited to claws and fire. Their red targeting lasers played over the walls of her cave, lighting up the warning she'd carved into the rock: danger. Beware of the dragon. But they didn't reveal the speaker. A message icon flashed up on a translucent screen that appeared in front of her. The newsletter dragon scanned it for viruses and malware and found none, but she still wasn't sure the message was safe to open. She checked its header. Nothing incriminating or concerning there. Mindful of her duty to protect the personal information subscribers shared with her when they signed up for Melinda's newsletter, the dragon moved the message to a secure server with no links to her hoard, her treasured list. The back wall of her cave rotated to reveal a futuristic command center, all sized for a dragon to operate. Sleek consoles descended from the ceiling, and she tapped on one to open the message. A three-dimensional projection appeared of a woman in a black dress which had spikes protruding from its hem and train. I guess she doesn't do a whole lot of walking around. One fall and she could impale herself. The woman wore a matching crown made of twisted iron spikes. She fixed black-on-black eyes on the newsletter dragon. What was with all that black? Black eyeliner, black eyeshadow, black lipstick, black talons. Were her teeth black too? Yes, they were, and her gums and her forked tongue too. How deliciously creepy. Let me guess. You're here to formally request a copy of all data I have on file for you? Or is this a forget-me request? Though with a getup like that, you'll be hard to forget. The spike-wearing woman laughed. Privacy is not a laughing matter. The newsletter dragon's claw hovered over the end message icon on her board. Oh, I know it isn't. But you want more than to be a gatekeeper, don't you? The Lady of Spikes spread her hands, showing off her talons. They weren't all that impressive, though. The newsletter dragon had longer claws, and hers weren't black. They were gold. Here, in her cyber kingdom, she could render her body any way she wanted, and she liked being brilliantly blue. Translucent scales covered the blue glowing lattice of ones and zeros that comprised her internal code. But she didn't need to be completely blue, so the spikes that ran down her back and out to the tip of her spade-shaped tail were gold too. After all, every dragon needs a little bling. But that lady with the strange fashion sense was right about one thing. The newsletter dragon did want more than this lonely vigil. Some page time would be a nice start. I deserve a story about me. The Lady of Spikes, who still hadn't introduced herself, nodded as if she'd read the dragon's mind, but that was impossible. Her thoughts were encrypted. I see it in you. You want more than a kingdom of code and a throne of data. You want materiality. You want both to matter and to be composed of matter. The idea was attractive especially because all the characters, like her pint-sized nemesis, possessed a physicality she lacked, and they were fictional. But I'm not. I'm as real as the newsletter list I guard. I matter. I should have all the page time, not that twerp ran. He doesn't even have any magic or special skills, unless repeatedly needing to be rescued counts. The newsletter dragon removed her claws from the panel and rested them on her hip instead. Maybe I do want to have matter. But let's get one thing straight right now. I do matter. Of course you do. Everyone matters, but not everyone is respected. You could change that. The Lady of Spikes cupped the air in her hands, and a transparent blue glowing sphere of data spun on her palm. Next, you'll tell me you can make that happen by giving me substance? The newsletter dragon raised an eye ridge in derision, but she also surreptitiously scanned that woman and the sphere she'd conjured. The readings made the newsletter dragon's eyes widen in surprise. It was an algorithm for a 3D printer to fabricate a dragon's body. Oh, not a real one, of course, but one made of plastic and metal, which was infinitely better than a fleshy one. It would need some circuitry and a CPU she could inhabit, but oh, how she wanted it. What's the catch? What do you get in return for making me a body? That's the beauty of this. I want you to do exactly what you've been wanting to do. The Lady of Spikes smiled, revealing her blackened teeth again. Villainy must not come with a dental plan, because those jagged choppers had never seen a dentist. Neither had the newsletter dragon, but she was digital, and she'd made damn sure to render herself with perfect white teeth that gleamed in the reflected glow of her bites. Though given this woman's fascination with sharp things, she might have filed her teeth to points to keep with the theme. And what exactly is that? The newsletter dragon leaned toward the projection of that woman. This? She held up her other hand, and a clockwork insect crawled out of her sleeve and into her palm. It cast a projection on the wall of a green-eyed child the dragon knew well. Behind him, a dragon stomped into view, and the boy fled. There was fear in his eyes and the respect the newsletter dragon had long been denied. She reached for that image and the future it promised as the projection cut off. You could rule them all, the Lady of Spikes said, her dark eyes glittered in the dragon's glow. Yes, I could. The newsletter dragon lowered a claw toward the accept button that had just appeared on her screen. Who are you? I never got your name. You can call me Dysteria. How do I rule them all? The dragon paused. Her claw hovered over the accept button, but she wouldn't push it until she had an answer to that question. With this, Dysteria held out her hand, and a black orb appeared on it. As it grows in power, so does its owner. What is it? The dragon reached for the orb, but it was just a projection. A little bit of chaos. Maybe even the seed of their destruction. That's what you really want, isn't it? To get one over on them? Well, this will put you permanently on top where a creature of your grandeur belongs. Dasteria closed her fist and the projection cut off. Do we have an accord? If you'll tell me where I can get that orb, then yes. Yes, we do. Visions of that orb danced in the newsletter dragon's head. She needed to get herself one ASAP. Of course, just tap the accept button and I'll tell you everything. Dasteria smiled, displaying her sharpened teeth. The dragon tapped that button and the bargain was struck. Now tell me about that orb. Now in between worlds. The newsletter dragon blinked, banishing that memory, and refocused on the Shadow Man. Did she need one more bargain? No. She needed a body and an incubator for the seed of her new power. Besides, this guy had a fell feel. She just wanted to get one up on Ran and steal the narrative of one of his books for a while. Every hero needed a nemesis, and for better or for worse, he was hers. She'd enjoy turning his world upside down. But this rhyming shadow offered a more permanent solution. Did she want that? Could she cross that line? The newsletter dragon regarded her transparent claws and slowly fisted them. Glowing tunnel, pensive Papa. Mount Eredrin, Shiari. I charged through the glowing purple portal into a tunnel of the same color and luminosity. That wasn't supposed to happen. I should have popped out the other side in my scribe's apartment. Papa followed a heartbeat after me because I'm little, and I still need both adult and magical supervision. Why'd you stop? He nudged me gently with his leg to get me moving. Because we entered a portal, not a tunnel. So what's all this? I gestured to the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. They all glowed the same eye-watering purple, and it went on for what seemed like miles. I used to like that color, but all this light was hard on my eyes, forcing me to squint. Papa had no such difficulties, but his eyes glowed all the time, so he was used to seeing a lot of light. Maybe something's wrong with it. Can you check since you have magic and stuff? Papa looked at the ceiling. He tended to do that when I asked the impossible. I can try, but this isn't made of the kind of magic I can work. I'd figured that out already since it wasn't green. But you almost teleported once, so you have some sort of translocational magic. That's a real word, right? I don't know. Papa pinched the bridge of his nose as if he had a headache. Then he went all quiet and still. I wrapped an arm around his thigh and leaned into him just to reassure myself he was still with me even though his mind was elsewhere. His stillness didn't last long though. After another minute, his hand dropped from his eyes and rested on my head. Did you get anything from your magic? Papa shook his head. I couldn't see his expression because of all the light, some of which pumped out of his eyes. Oh. I hadn't expected that, so the news left me speechless for a moment. That was a rare occurrence for me. Usually, Papa was the one who couldn't find any words. Come on. The exit must be nearby. Let's find it. Papa headed off to do that and took me with him because I was still holding tightly to his leg. But Papa had a very physical job that involved a lot of running and jumping and some other things he never talked about, so I wasn't much of an impediment. What if it's broken? Could we be trapped in here forever? I squeezed his leg and he dragged me a few more feet across the purple light that made up the floor. It felt solid, but what if it suddenly dropped out from under us? Papa brushed the hair away from my eyes. Let's not worry about that right now. We only just arrived. Let's have a look around first. Okay. I wanted to be part of the solution, so I let go of his leg and grabbed his big hand instead. But I had to run to keep up with him. Papa stood way over 6 feet tall and he had very long legs. One step for him was about 4 or 5 for me. I grimaced at the purple glow stretching incalculably far into the distance. If this tunnel went on for too much longer, I'd need another method of transportation. My legs were already tiring, and Papa was just plodding along in deference to my short legs. I eyed his big strong arms. He would pick me up if I asked, but he was tired from working all night for the Rangers of Mount Eredrin, our home. I could tell by the way his shoulders slumped. What did you do at work last night? Whatever they told me to do. Papa rubbed his eyes with his free hand. And what was that? I persisted. That dragon had ruined my plan to find out, so fate owed me some answers. But Papa just shook his head and went all quiet on me. Drat. Foiled again, and by my hero of all people. Was it that bad? I squeezed his fingers. My hand was too small to encompass more than that. No, not bad, just frustrating. Oh. What was so frustrating about it? This was more than Papa had said about this mysterious work thing for weeks. I might owe that dragon a small debt of gratitude for giving me this opportunity. I pressed a hand to my mouth to check that my jaw wasn't hanging open at the thought of owing her anything. Fates forbid that. Everything. Papa trailed off as something dark flashed past in my peripheral vision. He must have seen it too because we both turned to look behind us, but the shadow was gone. Did you see something? Yes, but there's too much light here for any shadows to form. I'd learned that before I could toddle thanks to Papa's overactive magic, which always glowed the same brilliant green as his eyes. Before we could turn around again, the tunnel ended and we fell. The world spun around us and grew a lot darker and a lot less purple. Where would we end up? Hopefully, on something soft in my scribe's apartment. I wanted to find a nice cushion at the end of this fall. But the longer we fell, the more I worried there'd be a dragon at the end. I squeezed Papa's hand, but there wasn't anything his magic could do. It didn't like air, and there was a lot of air rushing past us. I squeezed my eyes closed and prayed. That was all I could do. Don't mess with her. Earlier, in the gray between. At the edge of the world, two fronts clashed. Black clouds mushroomed out of those dueling weather systems, and the wind whipped the sea into a foaming frenzy. Lightning struck, and for a fraction of a second, it coruscated on the mortal veil. It was an ancient magical shield shining softly, and an interesting sight to watch while she whiled away the centuries. Darkness fell beyond her shrinking island, but not over the frozen woman staring into that distant storm. Luminous metal wings arched out of her back. They blushed pink as a sunset before fading to an orangey gold at the tips, casting a soft glow on her metal face. Waves beat against the rock she perched on, eroding it a little more each year. She was a forgotten relic of an age-long past left to rust or be reclaimed by the relentless sea, whichever came first. The constant barrage of wind and weather had tarnished her rose-gold skin, and in places her metal shell had cracked, revealing her clockwork interior. A key protruded from a heart-shaped hole in her back, but it hadn't turned in a long time. Only a little energy remained, and she used it to keep watching a distant shore. The agents of chaos were coming. She felt them scuttling around in between worlds. But that wasn't her fight anymore. Changes come in threes. Yes, in threes. So come and see what changes are upon the sea, she sang softly, but the wind snatched her warning and threw it away as a sleigh pulled by 8 miniature dragons flew toward her. Who the hell was this? The dragons flapped their wings backward to slow their descent until the open sleigh hovered just above the crashing waves. A woman alighted onto the black rails of her conveyance and leapt onto the rocky island next to the unimpressed Clockwork Angel. Dysteria had always been ostentatious, but this was a little much even for a show-off like her. Spikes extended from this wannabe queen's train that matched the twisted iron spikes on her crown. When her black-on-black eyes settled on the Clockwork Angel, Dysteria crooked her fingers, displaying the curling black talons she sported. Her power closed its fist around the key in the Clockwork Angel's back and turned it, giving her fading mental gears a jolt. Do you know who I am? Dysteria shaded her eyes. Behind her back that distant storm raged, but she faced into the sunlight breaking on a distant city of purple spires and the enormous gates that blocked its harbor. The lady of spikes and bad fashion choices, the Clockwork Angel said, not that she cared. Nor did she have enough power to think much about anything except her enemies, the agents of chaos. But she did enjoy the annoyed look her comment earned from that self-important woman. Spots of red flared in Dysteria's corpse-pale cheeks. You'll pay for that insult. Go ahead and hit me if that makes you feel better. You can't hurt me. Nothing can. That's why they'd left her here to rust. It was the easiest option and the most convenient. I was going to wind you up because you leave so much destruction in your wake, and I do love to watch you destroy things, but I'm not feeling that generous anymore, not after you insulted me. Dysteria turned and leapt back onto the rail of her hovering sleigh. The Clockwork Angel's power was running dangerously low again, causing her mental gears to slow. But she refused to apologize. This wasn't a social call. Dysteria had come for something. It would be better if she left as empty-handed as she'd arrived. I'm not your ally, and I'm not using that pretentious title you insist on using. Ah, but that's the beauty of entropy. It makes allies of us all in the end. Dysteria seemed to flow back into the sleigh as it lifted off. Perhaps. Oh, perhaps I'll just sit here and rest. Her sight was darkening. That conversation had taken all the Clockwork Angel's remaining energy. I doubt that, Dysteria said before she flew into the storm and vanished from sight. How long the Clockwork Angel sat there with her mind dark and drifting, she didn't know. But the first turn of the key in her back woke her right up. Whoever you are, keep winding me up. Indeed, the key kept turning, sending sparks arcing through her gears. But it wasn't enough to bring her back to life. The Clockwork Angel remained crouched on a rock, her chin propped on her pitted fist. Come on, wake up. Do what you were made to do, Shonofar said as she turned the key again and again and again. What was that angel doing here? Get up. Damn you. I can't leave my post. A click sounded, then the key stuck fast and refused to turn. Shonofar jiggled it. Oh no, you don't. I'm going to fire you up and you're going to help my friend whether you like it or not. But no matter how hard Shonofar tried, the key refused to budge. What a pity, the Clockwork Angel thought with the fading power left in her gears. Your last resort is broken. So sad, too bad. And the Clockwork Angel was having a hard time caring. Long had she knelt here, frozen by a loss of power because no one would wind her up until now, not even that creepy Dysteria. This angel was only here now because she needed something. No, turn, damn it. Shonofar slammed her fist into the key, but nothing happened. It was stuck fast. Don't hit it. We'll find another way to help, Carantis said from behind the Clockwork Angel's back. Was Shonofar holding a party back there? Why couldn't they leave her in peace? The Clockwork Angel drifted for a moment as her internal gears slowed. She was no longer a sentinel in the Order. They'd taken her purpose, her name, everything she was, and left her here like scrap metal to rust. Just leave me be. I'm a waste of parts. Something struck her back, a foot maybe? Wake up! Shonofar screamed. That Shantos had one hell of a kick. There was a brief scuffle as Carantis tried to restrain the angry angel. Thankfully, someone had realized that kicking a metal creature when she was down was a horrible idea. I might just kick back if you ever manage to power me up. Stop that, Carantis said, confirming her guess. I can't. We need her. Shonofar strode to the water's edge and he followed. She was dark and he was pale. Their white robes billowed in the wind. They had a purple stripe at the hem and the edge of the sleeves, marking them as archangels. But Shonofar had always been the more striking of the two, with her dark skin against her dazzling white robes. Carantis captured Shonofar's dark hands in his pale ones to keep her from hitting anything. We'll figure something out. How? We can't keep leaving our posts. Shonofar spun, pulling free of his grasp, and screamed in frustration, we need Metallara. That name slammed into the Clockwork Angel as if she was some sort of tuning fork, and its vibrations bounced through her gears, turning them. Power hummed through her. Metallara, that was her name. It had been lost, now it was found, and so was she. Her rose-crystal eyes lit from within as Metallara turned her head to regard the two archangels. Shonofar pointed at the storm hovering over the island in the middle of the mortal veil, where the gray between life and death dwelled. Its winds pulled at her braids, turning them into dozens of thin whips. Your enemy is over there. My enemy? Metallara creaked as she rose, but every part of her still worked so far. The agents of chaos. They're in the gray between. They'll overrun it if they're not stopped, and he who controls the crossroads between worlds. Shonofar's arm shook as she stabbed her index finger into those distant thunderheads. Controls the worlds it leads to. Metallara tilted her head to one side until she heard a soft crack, then she repeated that on the other side to loosen the stiff joints in her neck. It was the same old story. Both angels looked grim. But they couldn't join that fight. Their place was here, defending heaven and the ways to reach it. Go. Do what you were made to do. This is all the help I can give you. Shonofar shoved Metallara off the rock using her angelic strength and threw her halfway across the sea. Hang on, Sovan. Help's on the way. Try not to piss it off, Shonofar shouted into the wind after her. Who the hell is Sovan? Metallara wondered as she angled her body so her wings could catch an updraft, but not all of her was in working order. Her left wing joint froze, locking into the right position to send her into a tailspin, and Metallara plummeted toward the fog bank below. 4 sets of liquid eyes peered out of it at her, but none made any move to help her. Shocking the scribe. Westchester, New York. Oof. I landed on several strategically placed throw pillows, and Papa landed next to me, but the couch wasn't large enough to accommodate him, so it tipped and might have gone over if his magic hadn't grabbed its wooden base and plunked it back down where it belonged. Thank you, Papa. I crawled over and flopped onto his solidly muscled chest. Papa had always been strong, but whatever his masters had him doing every night for the last 2 years had put some serious muscle on him. But it was the lean kind. He'd never be one of those barrel-chested, sword-swinging warriors with tree stumps for legs, and that was okay because I didn't want to look that way when I reached my 20s. Are you okay? Papa slung an arm around my shoulders and held me tight as he stared at the ceiling, too tired to move. I'm okay. Are you? I raised my head from the comfy pillow his chest made and regarded him. Since tech ruled this place instead of magic, his eyes glowed a soft green in the electric lights that flipped on. Papa just nodded, but he didn't say the words that would have reassured me because he couldn't. Papa couldn't lie, not in words. If he didn't want me to know something, then he had to keep quiet like he was doing now. Oh no. That meant he wasn't okay. I blinked, but a tear escaped before I could stop it. Papa had a condition, but no one would tell me what it was or why he sometimes had seizures. Did I miss something? Melinda asked. I turned my head, hiding that lone tear, to look for her, and found her standing in the doorway holding a bunch of envelopes. Excuse us, but did a dragon just come through there? I pointed to the purple glowing portal floating above us. Melinda stared at me for a moment as she processed that. You're not joking, are you? No, ma'am. We're deadly serious. I pushed myself up, but Papa stopped me long enough to give me one last squeeze before letting go. That hug reassured me a little as I scooted to the edge of the couch closest to my bewildered scribe. You're telling me a real dragon came through there? That's impossible. Melinda waved to the portal, and her blue coat rustled in the wind sweeping in from the outer door at the top of the stairs that led to her apartment. We're impossible too, but we're here. I gave her a one-shouldered shrug. Yeah, but you've been showing up since people started reading the stories I write about you and your father. Before that, there was no portal. Melinda leaned against the door jamb and gave the portal a baleful glare for bringing a dragon here. This is crazy. There can't be a dragon here. I don't write about dragons for that reason. But you do have stories with dragons in them. Just the newsletter you took over. No one's read my other dragon stories because I don't want them to visit me. Melinda put the letter she was holding on a small table by the door, but they slid off the small mountain of gloves, hats, scarves, and other cold weather gear already occupying the table. There was more mail scattered across one of the couch cushions under Papa. I guess they weren't important because Melinda didn't even glance at them. But I didn't create that dragon, also known as my nemesis. I can't do that because I'm not a scribe. Only scribes can create characters, so you created her. I kicked my feet and my heels drummed against the couch's frame until magic wrapped around my boots and stilled them. Don't do that. It's not polite, Papa said around a yawn. You sound like you need a nap. Melinda tossed a pillow at Papa, and that gave me an idea. Papa caught the pillow and put it behind his head. He was taller than the couch was long, so his legs hung off the end and his booted feet rested on the floor. I crawled over until I was level with his head. All the better to see his face since Melinda had switched off the overhead lights. We didn't need them anyway. Between the portal's purple glow, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, and Papa's glowing green eyes, we had plenty of illumination. Why don't you rest while Melinda and I look for the dragon? Papa looked at me like I'd lost my mind. It was a look he often gave me right before he said the one word I disliked most, no. Why not? I'll be safe with Melinda. I leaned in close because Papa had lost some hearing in one ear, and I wanted to make sure he didn't miss a word of my brilliant reasoning. She's got scribal powers. If we get into trouble, she'll just write us out of it. No, if you're going to look for a dragon, then I'm coming with you. Papa sat up and pulled me into a tight embrace before I could escape. I'd forgotten how fast he could move. Nor did I like the sound of that if. It implied we had a choice about finding that dragon when we didn't. We couldn't leave that dragon to rampage in the real world. She might endanger our readers or kidnap our scribe. The possibilities were endless and equally bad. We have to find her, I said in case Papa was still thinking we had a choice in the matter. And we will, but we have to be smart about this. There's a big world out there, and we don't know if she ended up here or somewhere else. Oh. That made sense. I leaned into Papa and tried to hide the doubts I'd had. I should have known he wouldn't let a dragon run amok. You didn't see anything? I glanced at Melinda and hoped she hadn't just seen me doubt my hero, my Papa. But her understanding brown eyes said she had. Drat. I couldn't hide anything from her. As long as Papa didn't know, that was okay. Well, I saw a flash of blue when I opened the door to get the mail, but no dragons. Melinda stuffed her keys into her coat pocket. That was probably the dragon, since she's blue and she's all digital. Maybe she hasn't found a body yet. That would make finding her harder, and I had no idea how we could catch a creature made of code. But that still begged the question of where she'd gotten a body from before. She could be anywhere then, if that's the case. Papa leaned his chin on top of my head, but he didn't release me. Nor did I struggle. He owed me some more hugs to make up for being extra late this morning. So how do we find her? Well, she's digital, so Melinda stalked over to a wooden bureau topped by stacks of books with familiar spines. Cursebreaker Enchanted, Cursebreaker Darkens, Cursebreaker Faceted, Cursebreaker Falls, Cursebreaker Sundered, Cursebreaker Books 1 to 3, His Angelic Keeper, Hunter's Knight, Rogue Knight, Relic Hunter, etc. The 6 Cursebreaker ones were our books, with Papa at the helm as the hero and me as his beloved son and sidekick. His Angelic Keeper starred my Aunt Sylvan, but I didn't recognize Hunter's Knight and its sequel, Rogue Knight or Relic Hunter. Was our scribe writing books about other characters? I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I knew the next couple of books she was writing starred Papa, Auntie Sylvan and me, and she had lots of drafts for more books about us. So who were those other 3 books about? Were they expecting more page time too? What if there wasn't enough page time for all of us? I didn't want to share my page time, my books, or my scribe. They were mine, and the thought of losing her to another character had me burrowing into Papa's chest, and he held me tight. What's wrong? Papa asked, but I just shook my head. I couldn't talk about this with him because he didn't know there were books about us. But I could talk to my uncle. Uncle Murrin knew all about them, and so did my scribe. We'd have a private word about those other books later. Melinda reached behind those books and clicked something. What did you do? I craned my neck, but I couldn't see what she'd done. Melinda waved to the bar of blinking lights. I turned on the Wi-Fi. It should attract her. Then we'd better be ready to receive that dragon. Papa stood up while still holding me. Oh no, this was a prelude to another protect the child ploy. But it felt so good to be held, I didn't struggle. What do we do with her when she comes? Papa and Melinda looked at each other in confusion. Oh, they didn't have a plan, and I didn't have any to offer them. We need to send her back to the cyber world where she belongs, Melinda said finally. How do we do that? I asked. By the power of Wi-Fi. Westchester, New York. The newsletter dragon looked from the shadowy hand extended to her, seemingly in friendship to her code-created claws. What the hell was she thinking? No, she didn't want Rand to die. Where would the fun be in that? She enjoyed their cat-and-mouse games. No thank you. I already owe another entity a favor. I'm not looking to rack up anymore at this time. Because so far, everything was working out like Dysteria had predicted. Before that shadow could say anything, the portal spat the newsletter dragon out into a bright room. Gah. It was too damned bright. She couldn't see anything as she backed away. Shadows eventually replaced the light, stopping her in her tracks. When the newsletter dragon could see again, she was in a large white room full of machines. Now this was more like it. She wasn't corporeal anymore, so she didn't trip the motion sensor lights, but she didn't need them since she glowed blue all over. The dragon regarded her much reduced body and missed the one Dysteria had helped her create, but it had served its purpose, to get her to the real world on the other side of the computer screen, and it was damned nice to be here. Covering the metal and plastic body that woman had printed for her with a custom-made leather outer layer had been a stroke of genius until it had torn. But it had done its job and kept the magic out for long enough to mess with Ran. His reaction had been priceless. In fact, he should arrive soon. I'd better build another body, so I can finish what we started. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be easy since Dysteria had only printed one body for her. But technology was ascendant here. All around the newsletter dragon, gigabytes of information flew by as the residents of 24 apartments downloaded videos, shared images, posted on social media, read ebooks, and listened to music in the cloud. And she could tap into that because she was data too. With this orb, you'll be the master of it all, Dysteria had promised. The newsletter dragon removed the lone gray bite from her shoulder and examined it. How strange that so much should depend on so small a thing. It was an executable program compressed down to a single byte, and it might have sparkled as she gazed lovingly at the first step in her plan to rule the narrative once and for all. As the orb's power grows, so grows the power of the one who wields it, Dysteria had said, and the newsletter dragon had the makings of an orb in her claws. All it needed was some power to kickstart its metamorphosis. That spike-loving lady had been right about everything else, she'd be right about this too. The newsletter dragon felt it in her code. Come to me. Garb me in your data. The newsletter dragon raised her foreclaws to the ceiling tiles, and by the power of Wi-Fi she was reborn. Her tail plugged into a socket in the wall between a washer and a dryer, feeding power into the program that was unpacking itself to create and feed the orb. A load of laundry whirled around in the belly of a boxy device, and its clanking and whirring was music to her ears, but it wasn't the right vessel to grow her orb. For one thing, it didn't generate enough power. Electricity crawled up her tail, magnetizing it while the dragon scanned her surroundings. When that raw power reached her belly, it sparked a fire inside her. Oh yeah, it's barbecue time. Smoke curled out of her lips as a box of screws and metal washers flipped over, and its contents clung together, giving her the rough outline of a physical body, just like Dysteria had predicted. What else was she right about? The newsletter dragon rubbed her foreclaws together in anticipation, triggering the motion sensors, and they switched on the lights before she stripped them for parts to add to her growing body. She needed more Wi-Fi, more electricity, more metal, and the revving of an engine caught her attention. Yes, it would be perfect for her orb. She rushed toward it. She must have it. She must have all the devices to feed the seed of power clutched in her claws. Only then would she be master of everything she beheld.